So I'm super excited to introduce our final speaker of the night. So our final speaker is Marc Champagne, and he is a podcast host and mental fitness advocate. But here are 3 fun facts that you're not going to find out about Marc online. Number 1, his first strands of gray hair appeared in grade 8. Yes, that's his real hair when you see him come up here. His greatest fear is the day that he has to sit down to tie his shoes. And he worked in a fine dining restaurant as a culinary professional. But that fine dining restaurant was Red Lobster. Marc, come on up here and share your fuck up.
Now, I know what you're all thinking. I don't know if anyone saw me limping up here. Guy limps up here, full set of gray hair. He needs a fucking hip, right? You're mean. That's not true. It's one of my fuck-ups last week where I was playing basketball thinking I can play with it when I was in high school, rolled my ankle. Now I'm wearing high tops, super tight, so I don't fold over on the stage and have my third fuck-up for the evening to share. I want to start with the feature fuck up for me, which is also known as the 86 million person fuck up. And just to set some context and a little bit of background on this number, this was end of October 2019, so super fresh, so be very kind. Don't throw any salt on the wounds just yet. I was sitting by myself at a co-working space. Our team was spread out around the world. And I was staring at this Apple dashboard, which any app developers in the room, people that worked on apps, it's the famous iTunes Connect from Apple. And they show all your fantastic stats. And this one was the one that was really calling my attention because it was the number of people or eyeballs or App Store impressions we had reached in just over 1 year. Without any paid media, any type of advertising. This was all organic and through content strategies and whatnot. It was through Apple features in about 150 countries, apps of the day, new apps we love, start a digital journal, we were on the top of the list. And my next step was this, delete from App Store. And I'll never forget the emotions there. Again, staring at my laptop by myself, thinking, how could I fail at such a colossal level? What would my family think? What would my friends think? What would the colleagues that I left 3 years ago to start this venture think, right? Our advisors, our investors, all the brand collaborators that we had on the system, what would they think? And then, I sat in that for a little bit. And then all the mental fitness training that I had been acquiring throughout those years and the years before really started to kick in, and it all made sense. So let's rewind the tape a little bit. How the hell did I get to that moment? So about 3.5, almost 4 years ago, I was working a great job, benefits. I was a product manager, traveling around the world, experiencing new things, new people, super happy. Family was good. I was living in Montreal. We were in a super cool neighborhood, felt really fun. And there was this other part of the life that was, just exciting because there was always this idea in the back of my mind for this business or this idea. Because, I was going to that job for about 8 years. I was always getting up early in the morning and spending time trying to fuel my mind with positive things and doing practices like journaling and meditation and stuff. Meditation, that wasn't really that hip at that time, but things like that. And there was always a frustration because I'd listen to podcasts or I'd read books and the authors would always be dropping these really powerful, reflective questions that they're asking themselves throughout their life journey. And I'd write them down and then I'd copy them and paste them into another app. And I'm like, this is so backwards. Like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I crafted the email, shot an email to my brother-in-law, who was the closest person I knew to any type of tech experience. Mind you, he was building websites and was running servers with his IT company. So no app development, a bit of a red flag there. But regardless, we started working on it. And this was Kyō. Kyō's the Japanese word for today. So we're trying to help people focus on really reflecting that day and do everything possible to keep their mind in the best state of mind. And the app, that's a whole other conversation or presentation from that email to that picture in the App Store, but we'll save that for another day. But we got it out, and we had a huge vision. I mean, if you look, this is a mock press release dated 2024 that I had put together to pitch investors and show that we had a really big vision for this. It wasn't just an app, it was a mental fitness platform, that we wanted to be the go-to place where people would land. If they needed any type of products or services in this space, that we'd match them up with the right thing based on really good predictive tech and all of that fun jazz. So it was super fun. And then we started getting features in magazines. We started doing cool collaborations with people like Unsplash, actual clinics here at, that's actually a functioning clinic right now at One York, and then a ton of brand collaborations, VaynerMedia, TED, Lego, whether they were involved in the app, where I had interviewed like VaynerMedia, for example, their chief strategy officer, their chief heart officer, really cool things. Like the vibe was awesome. Except that was the outside vibe. When it came to the business and the actual financials of the company, our team could actually fit in the size of that tent, and it felt like we were just about to be blown off the fucking tundra at any moment. I actually think we were levitating a bit in the tent and just like, is this gonna go or are we gonna drop? And thankfully it dropped most times until, we got to the family meeting. And what happened here, like I said, I sent an email to my brother-in-law, and we were in my living room. He was there, my wife was there, her sister was there, my 3-year-old was sleeping upstairs, and we started what turned out to be a 4-hour discussion to really talk like cold, hard truth. Financially, we were already 100 grand plus into this. We had some private investors that we were considering bringing on board, but very, I don't want to say questionable, but uncertain terms. So the questions were, do we want to sink farther into this debt, and I think even more importantly, farther into the mental debt that this was causing, without really seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, we had a very strong product roadmap. We had just finished user research that was super promising, but at the same time, we didn't want to be naive to the fact that we were probably about 12 months out of iterating the product before actually seeing, a break-even point. At this point, we were covering our Amazon servers. That's it. 87 million people, brands all around the world covering our Amazon servers. That's it. So that meeting finished, and I felt like this for about a week, nonstop, oscillating from all those highs and lows, because it was the first time that hype and all that optimistic stuff that was going on, like all the people I was getting to talk to, actually disconnected from the actual reality of, shit, I left a really good paying job. I don't know if I want to go back in that industry. Doesn't seem like this is going to work. So all that time and money invested, probably from a financial standpoint, was a waste. Like, now what am I going to do? I moved to Toronto. As you know, it's fucking expensive to live here. So what do I do, right? And, I felt like I was underwater for a while. And it really wasn't until, ironically, the very practice of journaling, which was the idea which got me into this situation, that's actually what pulled me out and allowed the sparkler to come out of the water. Because it was really the point where I started to really think about, well, all the people I'm interviewing, they're all giving me the examples, they're all giving me the practices of what they do to keep their mind at the very top level. So how can I do that? Because right now I'm operating in a state of survival. And you don't make good decisions when you're in fear, when you're anxious, when you're spiraling out of control, which is where our business was for a long time. So we were making really questionable decisions. And now personally, I was really into that. So as soon as I started journaling every day, as soon as I started making my mind the full-time job of the day, things started to look up. And I started getting to the point where I was moving out of why questions, which is why me, why is this happening, and into what questions, like what caused this? What can I do differently so that I don't do this again? And here are the findings. The hype. The hype is awesome. There's a bit of a theme there with the hype tonight. It's great for marketing and PR and to land podcast guests and land brand collaborations, but it's not good when the hype is linked to the actual business, because those are two very separate things. And both speakers talked about that tonight. So disconnecting those two, which leads into the financials, just like your personal finances. If you don't know, what your rent is and all your expenses at really any given point, eventually that's going to catch up to you. And, we were doing everything possible to keep that tent on the ground. So we were in survival mode, shifting money around from other companies that, my brother-in-law was running to stay afloat. Personal money was going in, all this stuff. So we're just doing anything to survive. But what that ends up equaling is a messy financial situation and not a real picture of what's actually happening. And then lastly, I think just being honest with yourself. That family meeting was tough because it wasn't just the last 3 years of my identity wrapped up for that. We had about, at that time, 200,000 users relying on the app and talking about personal journal things, right? And their own mental health. And we're letting those people down, in my opinion. So, it was a really hard question of, do I really want to continue in this state? Can I? Or is there another way to help people around the world? And the answer for me was not to continue. And same with the rest of our team. So we decided to shut it down. Lastly, the most important and by far the most valuable thing I can leave tonight is, ironically, I speak a lot about mental fitness and mental health, and it wasn't until going through this process of really realizing that my mind had to be everything. Just like, we all flown on airplanes, you have to put your oxygen mask on first before helping others, right? So the question that I want to leave with everyone, and the question that really pulled me out of the water, and frankly, probably why I can stand up here and share the story and not completely break down, was, what will I do today for my fitness and health of my mind? And there were 180,000 questions in our app at one point and hundreds of questions from the speakers and in podcast guests, but that is by far the most important thing I can leave tonight, because when you can get to a point where your mind is actually working for you, then it doesn't matter what the situation is, doesn't matter what life throws at you, you have the tools and you have the mental capacity to get through anything and really come out on the other side stronger. So thank you.
That was awesome, and I'm so happy that some of that content still lives on and people can access it. So Marc, thank you so much for sharing your story. It was really powerful, and I think that's such a powerful note to sort of leave the third story on, that it's like all about the mind, and really that's the only way that you're gonna learn from your fuck-ups, but also enjoy your successes as well. So let's open it up to some Q&A for Marc. We do have time for a couple quick questions.
Go ahead.
Not good on these things. How long did it take you after you had to shut your business down to feel emotionally stable? And how did you get out of that?
How do I look right now? Well, so, no, not at all. Not at all. So in reality, end of October was the actual time, like that's when I hit delete, but the decision was made probably in June or July. So that's when I felt like I was really underwater. So it took some time to really process all of that, right? And just, again, drop the ego of what was built and all the identity. And I mean, I still go through it. Like, I'm still very much in a state of transition. I started applying for different jobs, did some contract work that I knew wasn't going to make sense. And now I'm at the point where just slow down, don't force it. And the network is strong enough and things are starting to show up. Like, the podcast is still running and I'm doing some brand strategy work for human-centered brands and helping with that whole ecosystem. But, it's easier said than done. Like, I have a 3.5-year-old that's, sleeping right now that needs to eat and all of that. I mean, thankfully, we have some savings that we didn't blow all of it. There's not much, but I think to really answer your question, at any point in your life, like whenever things feel out of control, the quickest thing you can do to get out of it is just flip into gratitude mode. Like, we're standing here, the lights are on, you guys are all awesome, the energy's great, we have these wicked sponsors, like there's no bombs being dropped in the building, like things are pretty damn good, right? So that flips you out of the mindset. And my ankles didn't buckle. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for asking that because it was a really tough period because if I set the situation, we've decided to shut this down. We clearly don't have the cash to continue. We have these users that are in there using it. Any app developers out there, we had 10,000 weekly active users. So, not a ton, but still 10,000 people. And we had no export features or anything like that. And we're talking about journals here. So we decided, listen, we've got to take at least a month to figure out some sort of export feature. It's not going to be pretty, but we owe this to our users. So that really took a lot of mental capacity. It was almost numbing all of the other things, right? So we were so focused on communicating with those users. Here's how you export. This is what's going on. We don't have another solution. You can go to the podcast. We're still interviewing people in the same theme. But we just emailed them, and then we did in-app messages, hoping that they'd get it. We consulted our lawyers here, are we obligated legally to make this feature or communicate in any way? So I often tell people it almost felt harder shutting the business down than actually starting it. But it shut down. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you very much for sharing. Just for clarity, I'm not sure if I completely understood. So you had the user base, but I'm curious whether it was the revenue model that you had struggled, and what exactly the issue was. Was it just the way that you were collecting the actual payments? Was it the subscription model? What was the disconnect between the financials?
Yeah, the $1 million question. So we had a pretty clear picture to that answer when we finished our user research, which would have finished in the summer of last year. But unfortunately, it was a bit too late. Because what happened, we built a product to serve my needs, essentially, at first. It was a scratch your own itch scenario. We got, I don't want to say lucky, but there was luck involved, but we started getting all these Apple features because of a lot of the big brands and the names, and it was a very Apple-ish design at that time as well, so we were getting the features. But the app wasn't ready, not in a server standpoint, it wasn't crashing, but the app flows. They weren't ready for that type of volume. People would come in and come out, for example. So, and we didn't talk to users early enough, I guess would be the real big insight. Because when we finished that research, it was clear, obviously it was clear to our team how to navigate the whole app. But for them, they were a bit confused and they didn't see the value in the subscription on the content. It's a very similar model to Headspace and Calm, just in our case, they're paying for questions, because the questions were guiding them through the journaling practice. And the questions were not coming from us, they were coming from all these experts like Adam Grant and people from VaynerMedia and stuff like that. So ultimately, the user flows needed to be adapted. And that's why I said, I think we could have fixed that, but didn't want to be naive. It would probably take a good 12 months to actually get to that point. And at that point, now you're almost 4 years in, there's actually people creating other apps in this space, and I've actually done work with some of them, and they're burning like $100,000 a month, but they're funded, so it's a bit different. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that happen really quickly just in the space when it comes to mindfulness type apps and things like that. Yeah, all right. Oh, hey, how you doing, man?
Looking back now, would you change the way that the app worked? Would you do things differently, the way that users could use the app?
Ooh, good question. Right now, as I stand here today, yes, because the landscape has changed a bit. I don't think I would have changed the way the setup was with the questions and all of that. I think we should have did more testing way up front just to see where were the disconnects. And what was starting to happen too is that we didn't have paywalls or any subscriptions on features. It was all content. And that was probably a miss as well. There should have been a bit of a mix in there to help people start the habit and then get to the point where if you wanted some of the premium services, then go for it. Yeah. See, you and 86 million other people. Why didn't you trust us?
Okay, I think that's a good place to stop for the Q&A. Maybe not that specific note, but Marc, thank you again for sharing your story. That was awesome.